My expectation or my plan was for us to go in quietly, start up a church, and nurture it quietly, kind of like how Faithful Word Baptist Church got nurtured, kind of like how Verity Baptist Church started up, kind of like how Word of Truth started up, but that didn't happen. We had a lot of adversaries from the sodomite population, and they gave us a lot of free press. The sodomite population basically catapulted this missionary project up to the limelight, up to the national headlines. So when Pastor Anderson came to Botswana, he was immediately allowed to go on the radio station. That happened Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning, a small group of us went to the radio station, and we dropped Pastor Anderson off at the radio station prior to 7 o'clock. Paul Windberger, he needed some batteries, so he asked Brother Nar and myself to try to find some batteries. Came back at 7:15 and kind of like, okay, what do we do now? But we went into the building. As soon as I went into the building, I saw a man who looked like a Catholic priest. He was signing in the front desk, and he turned, he looked at me, and he talked to me like he knew me before. He called me his brother. And I thought to myself, why is he calling me his brother? Because I was wearing street clothes. How does he even know I'm a religious guy? Well, we rode up in the elevator together up to the radio station. It was on the 3rd floor, and he was telling me he was actually a bishop of the Lutheran Church. He was actually in charge of all the Lutheran churches in Gaborone. So I'm riding up this elevator with this bishop, the guy who's in charge of all the churches in Gaborone, and all these thoughts are coming in my mind. But I want to focus on salvation. So when we went in the waiting room together, I asked him, I said, hey, more important than going to church, if you're to die today, are you 100% sure if you're going to heaven? He said, I don't know. That's the thing about Lutherans. You talk to 5 Lutherans about salvation, you get 5 different answers. I said, well, 1 John chapter 5:13 says we can know for sure. I quote in 1 John chapter 5:13, I said, can I spend a few minutes with you and give you the gospel, show you some verses? He said, some other time. Well, a few minutes later, he got escorted into the sound booth of Pastor Anderson. Then I realized why he was there. He was Pastor Anderson's enemy. He was the guy who was trying to get him banned out of Botswana. He was the guy who was trying to get me banned from entering into Botswana. That's why he knew me so well. And he was a guy he was actually the head or one of the heads of the Council of Christianity in the country of Botswana. He was a voice of Christianity in Botswana. He was probably the counsel for the government on Botswana. And here he was side by side with Pastor Anderson. And those of you who heard the radio interview, Pastor Anderson tore him up. His only ammunition was hate speech and contextualizing the Bible. Let me tell you something. If a religious person stands up to you and starts talking hate speech, that's not right. There's no reason why a religious person should start talking about hate speech. The Bible is very strong against homosexuality. I don't have to go through those verses with you. You already know them well yourself. It stands for a religious person to talk about hate speech unless he's an infiltrator. Unless he's an infiltrator. 2 Peter chapter 2 in the book of Jude talks about and says that the false prophet and the sodomite are one and the same. I believe the reason why, or the main application, is the sodomite will seek after the priesthood in order to corrupt the people. 20 years ago, I was in the corporate world. One of my co-workers, he was a sodomite and he wasn't in the closet. The interesting thing about him is he went to night school. He went to seminary. He was studying to be a pastor. People in my workplace are confused, saying, doesn't he realize that homosexuality is a sin? Someone actually walked up and said, don't you realize that homosexuality is a sin in the Bible? And he smiled and says, yeah, I know. He had no interest in becoming a pastor to serve God. He had no interest in becoming a pastor because he loved God. He wanted to infiltrate the church to turn the church to corrupt the people. Years after, I went to Fuller Theological Seminary. It's the largest seminary in the world. I don't know if the admissions people realized it, but they allowed a lot of sodomites into Fuller Theological Seminary. I had a lot of fellow students who were sodomites. And even when it was Even when there's no opportunity or it wasn't part of the discussion, oftentimes they were very vocal. They would raise their hands and they talk about that they were molested as a child. It wasn't their fault. Or they were molested as a priest and it wasn't their fault. That's why they were homosexual. Other times they would talk about saying they could serve God in a great way. It was a very awkward situation for the students. It was a very awkward situation for the professors. The professors, they didn't know what to do, so they would let them go on their little rant for a while, and then they'd go on with their discussion. Those students at Fuller Theological Seminary, they weren't studying to be pastors because they loved God. They weren't studying to be pastors because they wanted to serve God. They were studying to be pastors because they wanted to infiltrate the church and twist people's minds. We know over the last several decades, the sodomite population have targeted the entertainment industry. They have targeted the media industry, and they've infiltrated it and flooded it and saturated it. We're seeing that with politics. They're infiltrating that industry and saturating it. Now we're seeing religion, so we're seeing them become pastors now. Their goal is to corrupt people's mind, to turn them into merchandise, make money from them, and to change the way they think, and we're seeing it today. So when a religious guy stands up and starts talking hate speech, the thing that goes through my mind is fag first, pastor second. So when a religious guy stands up and starts talking hate speech, the thing that goes through my mind is fag first, pastor second.